All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on the next Moving Forward podcast. Today we're going to talk about some of the security implications with respect to a lot of the critical third-party applications a lot of organizations have adopted recently and will continue to adopt for really supporting critical business functions. My name's Brendan Travis. I am the Vice President of Business Development with Brook Consulting, and I am joined by my colleague, Steve Bedell. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Brendan. How are you today?
Couldn't be better, my friend. How about yourself?
Doing well, doing well.
Excellent, excellent. Steve is the Vice President of Deerbrook's Technical Services Practice and is our resident subject matter expert. And no shortage of topics to consider and I guess sort of security implications to consider when, again, we're talking about organizations who have adopted these critical third-party applications that are, again, hosted remotely, supporting really significant business operations that oftentimes house sensitive and protected information for a lot of organizations. So there's regulatory compliance drivers involved. There's a whole host of responsibilities that the organization is accountable for. And, you know, for better or worse, or if they know it or not, hopefully they do, but they've now sort of leveraged or are part of this shared responsibility model when it comes to hardening and securing these third-party applications, right? And I think just a lot of organizations, just by virtue of the fact that, you know, they've licensed these technologies with a lot of, you know, well-known names out there, I think there's a perception, maybe a misperception, that the security piece of that puzzle is accounted for, right? And the shared responsibility is probably more so on the side of the technology provider rather than the licensee of those technologies. You know, but just if you could maybe talk to Steve, just that misconception in general, and you know what some organizations might be missing as a result of that.
Yeah, and I think you hit it basically on the head there. That shared services or shared security model is there. The service provider, their base function is to provide you a tool. And as we look at Google Suite or M365, that they provide that collaboration suite and they want it to work for you. So they are providing an open set. Guests can come in. The setting that we always see is the guest can invite further guests. So it proliferates out that security decision to the guest of your information to be able to invite other guests in. So that's one of those settings you want to look at. But it's the Microsoft is providing that collaboration tool and wants it to work, doesn't want it to hamper the individual users, individual collaborators. Hey, I need this person from XYZ company over here. Send them an invite, get them in minutes, and then you're off and being productive. But what else does that do in the background is kind of that question and where that implication of the shared security model comes in. So there are Brook and other providers out there, different standards, different security analyzation tools that to different standards, CIS, CMMC, NIST, whatever else, that will give you that standpoint and allow you to benchmark your overall system against, and then be able to enter in items into your risk management risk portfolio and say, we accept this risk, but this risk is remediated type of thing. So that's
Yeah.
kind of that where the rubber meets the road.
And you bring up a good point, just as far as you know, you purchase the licenses, you install you get access to these applications. I think, you know, the sort of the knee-jerk reaction or the impetus is to start using it right away, right? Start getting familiar with it, leveraging it, whatever you're looking to do to start getting production you know, off the ground. So let's talk about the sort of the default state, right? So you get access to the system. You know, there's a lot of default settings that come, quote unquote, out of the box. And, you know, for a lot of organizations, it might be overwhelming, just the sheer number, I think, of settings that they have to be, or maybe should be looking at, maybe they don't look at. And so, again, I think oftentimes the default state is defaulted to on rather than on. You oftentimes have to opt out of things for to have obviously a security impact to mitigate risk, where you might not want to have users inviting whoever they want to have access to that system. So can you talk just a little bit about what those, that default state typically looks like, and some best practices maybe to consider the implications involved?
Yeah, definitely. Generally, the state is on, as you mentioned. So in the case of M365 or Microsoft 365, the everything is built off of SharePoint. So OneDrive sits in SharePoint, and then all the Teams channels, all the Teams conversations, the team information sits in SharePoint. So you can't turn off SharePoint because it's a natural function. Some companies we've worked with have said we don't use it and we don't invite other people into it. Well, you use it whether you know it or not if you use Teams and you use OneDrive, so it's there and the service is on. So just because you don't use it in your normal everyday workflow that you think of, it's always on in the background. So that means you've still got to come back and try and secure it. Microsoft in general and Google and the other collaborative suites out there have done better over the years of now MFA is turned on by default. When we started, MFA wasn't even a thought process back in the old BPOS days. And then they came in, oh, we need MFA now, but we're going to leave it up to the admin who sets up the user to turn it on. That leaves it up to human error. Now it's at least on through the conditional access platform, and the base conditional access for a Office 365 tenant is turned on. So it gives you the interior exterior control, but it's still open and freer than you would like. When we come in and do one of our assessments against the M365 scan, we typically use the CIS standard, which we find a lot of companies subscribe to and sets the best base level. We scan against 180 controls with the new version of CIS. The previous version was 160. So it goes through and looks at the conditional access, MFA, on for every user, separation of admin roles from the normal everyday user. That's still a thing for a lot of companies. They don't want to swap, especially some of the smaller companies. The users don't want to swap from admin privileges to their normal everyday privileges just to click a button and click save to add a feature. So they combine it all into one user. Well, that extends out your risk. If that account is compromised, then they've got full control over your environment, can shut you down, lock you out, and that's a bad day for the company.
No doubt, no doubt. And that, brings up a big point around, the provisioning of access. Who's got what permissions have they been provided, and who throughout the organization have been perhaps over provisioned in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
right? And, so I think that speaks to probably having some sort of script or sort of methodology you're working from at the point of access, or at least enabling access to these new tools. What does provisioning look like for the organization? And oftentimes, whether it be role-based or otherwise, hopefully there's some standards that are set to say, okay, because of this user in this particular area doing this function for the organization, here's what we can, at a minimum, be sure that they absolutely need access to. There's oftentimes probably some other nice to have sort of situations that crop up. What any thoughts and ideas on how to sort of best maneuver around making sure you're, again, providing that functionality where you can, but at the same time not introducing risk?
Yeah, in these days with AI and the PowerShell modules and APIs and all of that stuff, repeatability is the key. So even before you buy the license, have an idea of what services you're going to fire up and use right off the bat, to be able to set for every user, set up the roles that they need. This user is a standard everyday user, email, Teams, OneDrive, and then this user is going to be an additional user for admin functions. This user is going to be a Teams admin, and be able to assign those roles right directly through a script or an integration. And there's a lot of companies out there that are taking agentic AI and building those onboarding modules where it'll take a ticket or an email that is sent into the agent and create that user based on the automation scale. You identify this is a normal line worker and they get these functions. They get an E3 license, they get Teams, they get OneDrive. We're turning off Dynamics or whatever other sub functions of the license aren't there, just to control your risk. So it's automation and holding to the standards. And then with any compliance, you've got to circle back on a periodic time scale. Sometimes it's every month, sometimes it's quarterly, biannually, or yearly, and validate that your automation is still working and doing what you want it to do. Because we all love the new features. Sometimes we love to hate the new features that Microsoft puts out, but they are iterating very fast behind the scenes, and sometimes they
Yes.
break some of that stuff. So the full circle follow up and validation is kind of the key. And that's one thing that our audit assessment does for them. It gives you that formalized uh, standards and controls to go at year after year, quarter after quarter, depending on your use case.
Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of good points there. So one, having some forethought right beforehand in terms of who you're thinking about enabling certain modules or capabilities, functions within these applications, right? Having that predefined so you have some understanding on how this will be rolled out, and then leveraging automated tooling, AI or otherwise, to actually push that out and do it consistently across the board, right?
Yeah.
So it's not left, nothing's left to chance, right? It's already
Yep.
been pre-scripted in that sense. So those are key points there. You bring up another good point or challenge, I guess I should say, just in terms of maintaining these over the course of again whatever time horizon the license. I mean, probably for quite a while, right? These are critical technologies. They're part of core operations for your business, right? You don't take these decisions lightly. You onboard it. You're probably going to use it for quite a period of time. So the process mechanism around updates, right? And the updates always, you get the updates. It says, oh, there's security updates involved, bug fixes, whatever it might be. They're iterating on a regular basis, and while that all might be well and good, it could oftentimes introduce, right, new settings or otherwise that again come in a default state that is based off of this new update that
Yeah.
gets installed. And then, I don't want to say you're back at square one, but you then have to get a handle on, okay, based on this new update, what is net new
Mm-hmm.
based on, where we were and where we are now, and how do you go about that, right? So that
Yeah.
sounds like, another sort of process-oriented piece of this puzzle that, the technology is one thing and the people is another thing, but, the process involved by making sure you're doing things on a regular basis would lend itself to again mitigating risk and minimizing the opportunity for some of these things to be leveraged in a way that you might not want them to be.
Yeah. In these ecosystems, I mean, if we just look at Google Suite or M365, I talk a lot about M365. That's where a lot of my experience comes from. There is no way that one person can know everything in that environment and keep up on it. Develop a small approach, a small bite approach, leverage partners. Partners um, tend to stay up a little bit more on some of this stuff because they're servicing their customers broad spectrum, broad stroke. They can help there. We've seen an approach with some of our clients that they have sister companies, sister organizations that they'll do monthly or quarterly summits with. Hey, we focus on Teams and here's the new stuff in Teams. Well, their sister company focuses on SharePoint because they've got more document or product delivery through SharePoint to their customers. Share that knowledge around and work it together as a team, because there's just no way that any one person can stay up on it, they'd be up 24/7, 365, and trying to break themselves to keep up.
Yep. Um, and so, you know, you look at, I think, again, how these technologies are maintained over the course of a year, a calendar year, or otherwise. Oftentimes, or I shouldn't say oftentimes, but there's the potential anyway, right, for this sort of concentration risk where, again, you've got whether it be M365 or I think, one of the from several years ago, you may recall the SolarWinds situation where
Yep.
that organization was compromised, and there was sort of a Trojan horse scenario where the update that was pushed out actually had the malicious payload embedded in that update.
Yep.
So the compromise happened in advance, and now it was pushed out to however many thousands of users, right, that are part of their subscription base. And so, there is certainly the potential for that sort of situation to unfold. But as an organization, right, I mean, I think you're implicitly, relying obviously and thinking, well, this update is legitimate, and, why should I question it? Because it's coming from, the provider. So outside of your own quarantine or what, however you're before you actually install that, I don't know what organizations might be able to do to potentially mitigate that risk, right? Because that's a hard one to uncover.
Oh, definitely, definitely. If you go look in the Microsoft store, the Azure Marketplace, there are hundreds of thousands of integrations out there, and they all have their own different suppliers. And kind of what you're talking about is a supply chain attack. You have this integration into your environment, and then that supplier gets hijacked in their code stream or things like that. There's been any number of them recently. You and I have talked previously in another conversation about Stryker and how that came about and different things there. So you've got to know where your environment is coming from. When we originally started talking just a few minutes ago, the one of the iterative states that Microsoft's done is all these enterprise apps that you can register, which is a connector to an outside source, application, data set, whatever it might be. By default, that is on. Any user can do any integration they want to. So they can go out to the Microsoft store and say, oh, here's this widget that's going to put a meowing cat on my screen in my web window. That's a great idea. Okay. And they put it in there. Well, now that's an open connection through to your web stream, and it can hijack, listen in, potentially those different types of things. So that's been open probably the last 3 or 4 years or so. Now there's a process, but you as the admin of an environment have to go in and set it properly to have a check and balance in. A user requests an enterprise integration, an enterprise app, and then you as an admin has to go do the due diligence per the company standards to say, this is a legit enterprise, it's needed. Yes, this is a valid work stream that we have, and the user requested it. Okay, we're going to approve it. Then you get to decide as the admin what level of integration it comes into your environment. Whereas before that was all in the user hands. So that's one of the iterative processes that Microsoft's done. Put it in the right person's hands to understand it. And if they don't understand it, to go ask the right questions, where the user's just trying to get their work done. And, oh, this thing is going to help me get work done
Right.
2 times faster. Yes, 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 done. And they're off and running.
Sure. And meowing cats. I mean,
Yep.
there's a lot to like about that, and a lot of production that comes from meowing cats. Let's be honest. But again, another great point that you're dealing with the third-party applications you've licensed, but then fourth, fifth, sixth degree of separation, right? So from the supply chain, all these different integrators. Again, you're getting farther and farther removed from the core functionality that you've quote unquote locked down.
Yep.
And now you're introducing, X, Y, and Z as far as other considerations you have to take into account. But that brings into a point you brought it up, the business justification, right? So if you want some of this new functionality and integration, is it a must-have? Is it it's a nice-to-have? What business value are you getting out of that? And that's really where you need, the business stakeholders to weigh in
Yep.
on, okay, is this worth it? Do we, see value here? And then obviously communicate accordingly with the admin or, the IT function. And hopefully there's a security oversight, right, as well, to say,
Yep.
okay, we see business value, right? We can certainly, instruct the administrator to make that happen. But from a security perspective, is that the right thing to do, right? Does the business value outweigh the security risk, or
Yep.
what does that sort of ratio look like, right? And then you sort of make an informed decision rather than just going willy-nilly and sort of, adopting everything one at once.
Exactly. And it's that due diligence to go out and look at this integrator's website. A lot of companies now post their SOC 2 report. You can look at it right on their website, their security standpoint. You can get that information. We'll give you some clue in depth into what the company looks at, how they view it, things like that. So yeah, it's all that. A lot of people look at it as what's the business driver, like you said, and typically think financial implications. We turn this on, how many people are going to use it? What's the license cost for us? Well, even before that is the security concerns and what does that do for us? It's kind of the new updated question of, as a young sysadmin, getting requested to open up a VPN tunnel between this company to this company, and the user requests an any. So you're opening up a potential sewer tunnel to whatever they've implemented on their side and whatever security they have on their side. So you're automatically accepting their risk as well. It's kind of in the same kind of light. It's that same thing now. So you're opening up to whatever risk they've already accepted on their side. So
Yep.
you just got to understand it and have an idea of what you're doing when you get there.
No, that all makes sense. And I think a lot of this conversation seems to have centered around hygiene, right? And making sure that, while you're adopting these and leveraging these technologies for, obvious reasons, that you have an accountability and responsibility organizationally to make sure that how those technologies are being leveraged and utilized are being done responsibly and obviously in accordance with any regulatory or compliance obligations.
Yeah.
And that, sort of hygiene, I think is a control objective or a control maneuver, if you will, that allows you to manage and mitigate risk throughout the course of that license life cycle.
Yeah.
Um, do you any thoughts on, how often those sort of reviews should happen? To sort of baseline, okay, where are we at any given point in time, and are there things or settings or otherwise that we thought was one thing and that turned out to be another? Like, what's a good sort of rule of thumb, if there is one, along those lines?
When I talk with clients about this, I talk about, so Microsoft has their tenant secure score. They have a few other scores built right into their default reporting. Go in and review that at least monthly. See what new items have popped up in the last month. Does it concern us? Do we really worry about it? Do we just accept the risk, or do we remediate it? So have an idea of what that secure score is made up of and how it changes and floats over a month time frame. That's the first place to start. Get somebody's eyes on that process. Then, based on your criteria, your compliance policies, it might be biannual, have a third party come in and audit where you are now versus the last scan. It might be yearly. Generally, what I talk about with clients is that yearly scan where we come in, validate against the 181 controls. We leave you with a remediation roadmap based on criticality, known exploits, that type of thing. And then you pick away at it over time, reducing your risk each time you check off one there. And you still maintain your process of monthly looking at the secure score or the other scoring in the tenant, oh, this new one popped up. We got to remediate this one now. That's going to decrease your risk and such. So it's that layered process. But I would say at least yearly, there should be some level of third party or bigger tool audit of the standpoint. And ideally, it would be comparable to your last known scan or starting point. And if you've never done one before, pick a tool, look at it, decide on it, get the baseline, and then set your reoccurring time frame so you get that baseline and repetitive. And what senior leadership or owner of a company is not going to love the fact that the IT staff puts a report on their desk once a year. Hey, over the year, we maintained this level of secure score, or last year we were here, now we're here, and we're better secure for it. Those are all great metrics to put out in front of leadership or stakeholders or shareholders.
Yeah, I think all of this sort of flies in the face with from a lot of catchphrases like in our industry, whether it's set it and forget it,
Yeah,
or run on autopilot, or out of sight, out of mind. You hear a lot of those things, and what we're trying to bring awareness and understanding on is the what you don't know can indeed hurt you,
yep.
or certainly could have ramifications that are undesirable, to put it lightly. So this has all been great, Steve. I think it's if anything, it's going to become more challenging going forward, just to again, as we use more of these technologies, as the sort of the dynamic pace of change ramps up, the AI element piece, adding complexity into everything, those are all important considerations. But before we sort of say goodbye for the day and say farewell, any parting thoughts here? Any sort of closing comments you want to bring to the table?
I mean, the word to the wise or the guidance to anybody out there that has an M365 tenant or whatever collaboration suite you use is it's an entire system. It lives, it breathes, it grows, and every day it can change because we've got users in the environment, and users have to be a leg of the or a spoke in the wheel, coining a term. So we need to train the users to make the better decisions, anti-phishing and what to click on, what not to click on, educate them, and have our good, secure processes with circle back validation pieces in there and documentation of process procedure and all of that. So it's a life cycle that's
Yep.
an ever breathing life system. So
Yep.
just set that up for whatever your industry recommends, whatever compliance you're beholding to, and work the process, and you'll be better for it.
Yeah. There's no easy button per se, right? When it comes to this, there's no that there's no way of, it's not a one and done sort of proposition, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you have to stay on top of it if you want to put yourself in the best position for success, and again, um, uh, conduct your business responsibly. So I think that's probably the primary takeaway. Thank you all for tuning in on this latest edition of the Moving Forward podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much. Have a great
All
day.
right, thanks, Steve.